Welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Over the next half an hour, we'll be looking beyond the business headlines by giving you in-depth perspective on the stories that are affecting all of us. Coming up on today's show, Israel and Hamas have called a ceasefire. The fighting lasted less than 2 weeks, with all of the violence and atrocities being played out online to a global audience. More than 200 people were killed, all but 12 of them Palestinian. While core support for Israel remains broad and deep in the United States, a growing number of Democrats became comfortable applying more skepticism to one of the United States' closest allies. Tawfiq Haddad, a Palestinian academic and author, will be joining me from Jerusalem for the latest on the ground. And insurance penetration remains alarmingly low in Africa, but according to a recent McKinsey report, the sector is potentially worth $68 billion in the region. Henry Mascot, the CEO of the insurance technology platform Curacell, will be joining me from Lagos to explain how AI could drive greater insurance inclusion across the continent. Then later, I'll be reporting on the biggest company news stories of the week. But first, let's start the show with business news from here in the UK, where the country's unemployment rate unexpectedly fell to 4.8% between January and March, during a time when the country was in a strict lockdown. The data released by the Office for National Statistics adds to signs that Britain's labour market has not suffered the severe hit feared at the onset of the pandemic. With the government still supporting 4.2 million furloughed workers, the Bank of England has forecast unemployment to peak at 5.4% by the time the scheme is wound down during the third quarter of 2021. The unemployment rate was at 5.1% in the previous quarter. In other British business news, less than 24 hours after bosses from within the leisure and hospitality sectors welcomed the relaxation of coronavirus lockdown rules across England, plans for a new COVID tier system have reportedly been drawn up by the government as fears mount over the Indian variant. The strain is already dominant in scores of English local authorities, and Prime Minister Boris Johnson has now shifted his language about charging ahead with the country's full roadmap out of lockdown. Well, for more on this, I'm now being joined by our business correspondent, Simon Pusey. Simon, Monday was supposed to be a day of celebration, but it's quickly turned to a period of anxiety. What's gone wrong in this whole confusion?
Well, the weather was terrible. That was annoying, but that's often the case. Yeah, exactly. Restaurants, pubs were allowed to go inside now into these places, albeit with social distancing and masks. Gyms have reopened, and theatres and museums, and lots of places that people have been missing really for about 12 months really. So there was that excitement that there's a bit of normality coming back. But yes, news of this new Indian variant has been scaring people, that was supposed to be a lot more transmissible. I think what Boris Johnson has done this week is to try and quell those fears and say that actually the data suggests that the vaccines that were all being given at the moment, that are being rolled out, are actually working against all of the variants, including the Indian one. A lot of people talking about travel and how we should have closed the borders earlier to people coming from India, and how people are still coming in from India. But I think the message from the government is go out and get your vaccines, and this will protect everyone against any new variant, including the Indian one. And Boris Johnson has said that he sees nothing to stop the rollout of the easing of restrictions. He sees nothing yet to stop that. So we've had on Monday, obviously, everything opening back up. The next date is in June, when supposedly no restrictions will be in place. A lot of people are actually saying that's very, very unlikely, that come the 21st of June, it's going to be completely back to normal. There will probably be lots of social distancing still introduced. If we just look at holidays, obviously people looking forward to summer holidays and whether they're going to be able to get away. We've had this very small list of countries where you can go and you don't have to quarantine when you get back, including Portugal, but not many others on that list. And there's a bit of confusion around the amber list. Lots of countries have been added recently to the amber list. The amber list is really, you can go to these countries, but not for holidays. These are on urgent business. So, for example, if a member of your family dies and you want to go to the funeral, or there's business that you need to attend, you can do that on the amber list. But there's a lot of confusion as to why the government, and skeptics and critics asking why the government decided to add so many countries to that list. In a sort of side note, Dominic Cummings, the Prime Minister's former advisor, has been sort of getting back in the mix, and he's been talking about how secrecy during the handling of the pandemic has contributed greatly to what he called a catastrophe. He attacked former colleagues in the civil service, saying that it had been a disaster. A lot of people looking at Dominic Cummings and saying, well, you were at the helm at this point, you're surely to blame as well. Who knows what impact he's going to have, apart from maybe embarrassing the Prime Minister. But I think the main takeaway from all of this is that people are looking forward to the 21st of June, and are we going to be completely opening up, or will we remain in some form of lockdown or some form of restrictions? I think we've just got to watch and wait really and see what this Indian variant does, and whether the vaccines are as good at restricting the spread of the virus as probably we hope they are.
We're watching and waiting. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
Now to our next topic. 2 weeks into the deadly conflict between Israel and Hamas, and the fighting is over. More than 200 people were killed, all but 12 of them Palestinian. Both sides have paid a heavy price. Israel has destroyed Hamas's offices, tunnels and weapons development facilities, and killed several of its senior officers. For Israel, solidarity with the Palestinians has shifted online and gone global. Protesters have linked arms with other popular movements for minority rights, seeking to reclaim the narrative away from mainstream media. In Washington, Democrats are locked in an internal row, leading many to question Joe Biden's commitment to social and racial justice. Well, for more on this, I'm now being joined by Taoufik Haddad, a Palestinian academic and author. He's joining me from Jerusalem. Our interview was recorded before the declaration of the ceasefire. Taoufik Haddad, thanks so much for joining me on Channel's Business Global. What a complicated discussion we're about to have, especially because I'm recording in London. We've got lots of viewers in Nigeria. So many people are split on this topic, but you are obviously close to the epicenter. What exactly is taking place on the ground?
So I am located in the East Jerusalem neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah, which has been the epicenter of this issue. At least the start of it, although right now attention is focused to Gaza and other parts of inside Israel, etc. Basically, for the last 40 days, there's been major protests that have been taking place in the neighborhood because Israel has been trying to evict 4 families that live in the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood. These are refugee families that are from the 1948 war, whose houses were built in the mid-50s by the Jordanian government and the United Nations. And now extremist right settlers backed by the Israeli government with support from extremist groups in the United States are trying to evict them. We've seen demonstrations at all parts of the day taking place. The streets of Jerusalem smell of this skunk water. There are, there's cavalry around here. There's rubber bullets. There's mayhem at many times. But I don't want the focus just to be on Jerusalem, of course, because what's taking place is actually much larger, as you know. We have major escalations on a military front in Gaza. We have more than 220 people killed on the Palestinian side, around 11 Israelis killed. We also have 200 different confrontations that took place just yesterday in the West Bank, as well as every major city, Palestinian town and city inside Israel that also witnessed demonstrations.
There's a different narrative coming out of Palestine. For one, this isn't taking place just in Jerusalem. This is being played out globally, online. And you definitely see with the hashtag Free Palestine that they've been able to, group together with other socially justice groups across the world who, they're not religiously motivated. They're not politically motivated. They just, they're seeing something and they want to speak out against it. I want to ask what you think the heavy cost of this is for Israel, who are unable to control the narrative, compared to the heavy cost for Hamas and the Palestinians. We know the Palestinian death toll is a lot higher. We're hearing reports of several senior commanders being killed. We know that some weapons facilities have been completely crumbled. It does appear that Israel is winning this war, but are they? When you look at kind of, the backlashes, I'm sure you saw the streets from the scenes from the streets of London with, tens of thousands of people going out to protest.
That's correct. I think what we're witnessing, because of the nature of the struggle and the mass outpouring of solidarity outside, as well as regionally, as well as, of course, the protests that are taking place across entire historical Palestine, that people are standing up and they've become more and more aware of the situation. People are fed up after every 3 or 4 years, this thing exploding, and then everybody tries to put back Humpty Dumpty together again. It's not going to work. Israel obviously has superior firepower. It has a $36 billion 10-year military agreement with the United States. It has political and financial support from the Americans and the Europeans, but it is losing the political war, and it is losing the moral war, and it is losing control of the discourse too, because social media is helping that. And we're seeing people standing up for that, even if their governments are not actually taking the action. And we'll eventually see this result in more pressure, hopefully, to try and stop this from recurring, to go back to the more fundamental aspects of what is generating this conflict again and again with so much bloodshed.
Absolutely. Tawfik, before I let you go, I do want to ask you a little bit about the politics. You know, politics is obviously at the heart of most wars, isn't it? Where does this leave Abbas? Where does this leave Netanyahu, both politically fragile at the moment? I believe Abbas was supposed to be talking about an election, although some people didn't believe that. And of course, we know that Netanyahu has failed to hold a government, and he's got a lot of cases in court. Yeah, just briefly, your explanation on where that could be heading.
Well, let's start with the Palestinians. This issue started in Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, there is no Palestinian Authority. We're under direct Israeli military occupation control here. So he has no influence here. And as I said, it's a popular uprising because people are being evicted, and it doesn't just affect those families. There's more than 100,000 people in East Jerusalem, Palestinians, who are subject to eviction because of different kinds of violations or legal struggles that they're trying to face. That's basically because Israel wants to basically take East Jerusalem, cut off the holy places. It's built 3 different sets of concentric circles of settlements around Jerusalem. And Palestinians don't really have that much to lose. So when it comes to Abbas, or Mahmoud Abbas, or the head of the PLO, he doesn't have much influence there. On one front, I will say he did do something that I think was politically relatively smart, which was when he called for the elections, what he was really trying to do was to try to get the Americans and the Europeans to intervene. Because basically during the Trump administration, we witnessed America took the embassy and put it in Jerusalem. This has been a longstanding American policy. And there was no word, there was no fight back on this from the international arena. That meant basically that the Americans and the Europeans did not stand up to actually allow for elections to take place in Jerusalem. And now this is the result that we see. Okay, and in fact, so it's actually trying to push back against something that the Palestinians had lost. Europeans and Americans had accepted elections in Jerusalem in 1995 as well as 2006, but they didn't push for it this time. And so, but during that interim period, there was also political pressure put on the Palestinians. The internationals claimed that, oh, we can't push forward the political process because the Palestinians are divided. So how do you solve the division of the Palestinians? Well, you have elections. Well, if you have elections, you have to be able to have them across where the Palestinians are, including in East Jerusalem. And so that's the situation on the Palestinian side. But as I said, he's not in a position to really be able to do very much, especially because he has no people on the ground in Gaza nor in Jerusalem, which are at the heart of this issue. As far as Netanyahu is concerned, I think he's in and Israel in total is in a big dilemma, to be frank. The entire military and political class inside Israel is very aware of the fact that this campaign in Gaza is going nowhere. They have not achieved anything except a lot of destruction of infrastructure and a lot of killing of civilians. We know at least that half of the deaths have been children, women, and old people. And that's not to say that the men who have been killed were militants either. As you noted, Netanyahu himself also has a political dilemma. There have been 4 elections. They haven't been able to form a government. He has legal cases against him. And he wants to try and come out of this with a kind of political victory image, but he doesn't have it. And that actually makes him more and more dangerous. If he tries to make a ceasefire without that in his hands, the right wing will come up against him. And so he's actually in an even bigger political dilemma, not to mention the fact that, as I said, all this struggle has unleashed the ghost of apartheid that people are becoming more and more aware of, and more peoples are organizing around.
Gosh, the ghost of apartheid, a pretty chilling terminology there. Tawfik Haddad, a Palestinian academic and author. Thank you so much for joining me. Coming up on Channel's Business Global, I'll be discussing insurtech in Africa with Henry Mascott, the CEO of the insurance technology platform Curacao. See you after the break. Welcome back to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. In a moment, I'll be speaking with Henry Mascott, but before then, here's some company news for you. Retail sales in China rose 17.7% in April, much less than the 24.9% forecast by economists, and down from the 34.2% jump seen in March. China was the first major economy to bounce back from the coronavirus pandemic, but consumption has lagged in the country's overall economic recovery. Retail sales contracted last year despite expansion in the country's GDP. Other data released by the National Bureau of Statistics revealed that the urban unemployment rate fell to 5.1% in April, down from 5.3% in March. The Japanese economy contracted at an annual rate of 5.1% in January to March, slammed by a plunge in spending over the coronavirus pandemic. The worse-than-expected data has raised fears that the country is heading towards a double-dip recession. The contraction comes at a time when the government is struggling to speed up its vaccination program and contain virus cases. Restaurants and bars are now being asked to refrain from selling alcohol, in addition to closing early. The inability to curb a rise of infections could also fuel concern over the staging of the Tokyo Olympics, which are due to be held in July. Cancelling the Games would deal another blow to the world's third largest economy. Cross-channel railway firm Eurostar says it's no longer at risk of collapse after its shareholders, including its French majority owner, SNCF, agreed to back a refinancing deal with banks worth £250 million. In January, the company warned it was running out of cash due to the pandemic's impact on travel and tourism. Eurostar has called for state support to get it through the crisis, but authorities in the UK have been cautious about committing to any kind of bailout. Eurostar bosses said the funding will allow us to continue to provide this important service for passengers. It's currently only running one train per day between London St Pancras and Paris Gare du Nord, and one a day between Amsterdam and Brussels. Now to our next topic. Across Africa, insurance penetration stands at just 2.8%, considerably lower than the world's average of 6.3%. According to a recent McKinsey report, the continent has a potential insurance market value of $68 billion in terms of gross written premiums, which would put it at the 8th largest in the world. InsurTech could be the region's solution, as firms combine innovative technologies with a digital mindset to achieve growth and develop new business models. Well, for more on this, I'm now being joined by Henry Mascott, the CEO of the insurance technology platform Curacao. Henry Mascott, thanks for joining me on Channel's Business Global. I apologise in advance because it's a very broad question, but I'm sure you're the man with the answer. Why is the predominant of Africa uninsured?
Thank you very much for that question. That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? So there are a couple of answers, that when we think about why that is the case, there are a couple of reasons why we think so. One of it is obviously sort of like the economic realities of the continent, right? So we're majorly emerging markets, we're developing. So insurance, the way insurance has typically been designed, it started out originally as a B2B product, and then it went into sort of like an upper class and then into middle class. So traditional insurance has just been designed for people who have disposable income. So with that model, it means it can't reach most of the people who are currently on the bottom of the pyramid, or which is most of Africa. So that's one of the reasons. So to be able to solve that, you have to now start to redesign products so that you can access people who make $1 a day and have products like that. Another core reason, why a ton of the continent is uninsured is also has to do a bit with culture, right? So from time immemorial, people are kind of like used to community support or family support. So the way the West or people in more developed markets insure themselves is by using insurance companies, while in this part of the world we insure ourselves through our friends and family, right? So I reach out to mom, I reach out to dad, I reach out to my community, I reach out to the church community, I reach out to the sort of like whatever religious community I belong in. And that's how, so there's a bit of culture in there as well. And this third thing I like to think about is just sort of like how distribution works. So because there's a lot of, basic infrastructure that is missing. So that also affects insurance companies when it comes to agent networks, broker networks, and distribution. So, but again, some of all these problems are starting to get easy with technology. So those are the 3 points I typically say. So the way products have been developed before now, culture, the way people are, and sort of like how distribution networks work.
Okay, well, you get 10 points for that answer, Henry. As with most sectors, we know the COVID pandemic has caused so much upheaval. For a lot of companies, it's accelerated some of their visions. What would you say COVID has done to the insurance sector, particularly when it pertains to Africa?
Yeah, so the interesting thing is, actually is that the insurance market in Africa has been growing at 7% year on year for the past couple of years. So it's been the fastest growing insurance market in the world. Like that's like double what other markets have been growing at. But unfortunately, COVID sort of like, affected consumer spending all around across the world, how, user behavior, what people are spending money on. Unfortunately, insurance in Africa has also been affected. So there's been a decrease in terms of like that growth rate and what people are buying. So people are prone to buying insurance at this point because obviously, like I said, there's less sort of like consumer spending with all the uncertainty. But what we're also seeing as well is COVID has accelerated a lot of digital transformation. So insurance companies, we're seeing a lot more adoption of technology by insurance companies, enabling them to cut costs and be more efficient in terms of running their business. So for us, we've seen a lot of growth during this pandemic and adoption of our products, of our core products because of COVID. So while the general insurance sector has seen a bit of decline, we've also seen a bit of improvement in companies that cost that sell technology.
Absolutely. InsurTech has been cited as the saviour and is going to be able to fill the gaps. I know there's been a series of funding rounds. I know you've just got $500,000. Congratulations on that. What is that new sector for those of us who don't understand it? And tell me about Curacao in particular.
Yeah, so InsurTech, right, just which is slightly sort of like a subset of fintech, is basically applying technology to insurance, right? So saying, hey, the insurance is a very traditional financial services industry. How can we use technology to do things better, right? So whether it's save costs or improve profits, or generally just like improve how things work in insurance. So it's merging technology and insurance, right? For Curacao, we're InsurTech. We like to think of ourselves as one of the hottest InsurTechs on the continent. And really what we're doing for us, our mission really is to help drive up insurance inclusion in emerging markets, obviously starting out of our own continent in Africa. And how we're doing this currently is to provide technology, some of the sort of like take the best sort of like technologies that exist and apply it to insurance problems, helping insurance companies cut down on their costs or also help them improve on their revenue. So our flagship product, which is our Curacao Claims product, is a claims management and fraud detection products that insurance companies use to digitize their claims value chain and do better fraud detection. So we launched this product about 2 years ago. At this point, we have about 10 insurance companies in a couple of African markets, 3 of them to be precise. And we've currently seen the value of created insurance companies from our clients increased about up to 70% the amount of time they take in processing claims. And we've been able to help them also detect up to 25%, fraud that they would have previously missed in their manual method. Cumulatively, I think in the past couple of months, we've saved close to about $350,000 that would have been previously missed in fraud. But again, that is our flagship product. We also have a couple of other.
Sadly, that's all we have time for today, but do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channels Business Global. Goodbye.